Welcome to another Fast Talkers with me, Jennie Gow. Once again, this is an opportunity for people from the paddock to get together and have a good chinwag about the things that matter to us this week in the world of motorsport. And joining me today, I have a fantastic panel made up from around the world. First of all, Ben Hunt is the motorsport and F1 correspondent from The Sun. Hi, Ben, you all right?
I'm very good, Jenny. Thank you very much. Yeah, all good here. Nice and sunny today.
Beautiful. Next up, we have from Brazil, although not in Brazil at the moment, wonderful freelance journalist, Julianne Cerasoli. Is that the right pronunciation for once?
Yeah, well done, Cerasoli. This surname comes from Italian language, and in Italy, they are very confused about it. Some people say Cerasoli, some people say Cerasoli. So it's freestyle surname.
Okay. Well, that's good. By the end of this, you see, the problem is, in the paddock, I always just call you Julie Andrews.
Yes. That's Will Buxton's fault. He started with the Julie Andrews thing.
I've never actually said your surname. That's really bad, isn't it? Never mind. Let's continue. Across to Asia, and on-site presenter for Fox Sport Asia, Matthew Marsh. You see, that should have been easier to say, but not at all.
No, well, it's going to get even more difficult later in the day as the sun is setting here in Hong Kong, and it's about time for a gin and tonic.
Oh, bliss. It's probably a bit too early for us to start, but where there's a will, there's a way. Lots going on in the world of Formula One and motorsport this week. So we'll talk a little bit about George Russell's victory in the virtual Grand Prix that's to come. But I wanted to start by talking about sort of the biggest news this week, which is the cancellation of 3 more races. Azerbaijan's gone, Japan's gone, and Singapore's gone. And Matthew, I suppose from a Fox Asia point of view, that's not great news.
No, it's not great news that we've lost the Singapore Grand Prix from this year's schedule, but I wouldn't say it's a massive surprise. I mean, I think we know that the cost of putting on particularly a race like Singapore and the preparation start, as you know, many months in advance, and without having an audience, I think it just doesn't make a lot of sense financially. It probably doesn't really make a lot of sense anyway, because to Singapore, it's not a Formula One race, it's an event. And so I think it made sense for them to say, you know what, let's take a year off.
I mean, Ben, with regards to Singapore, if we start with that one, it's always been seen as the jewel in the crown, the night race. It's where big money deals are done. It's where a lot of people spend a lot of money. How big a blow do you think it'll be for Formula One?
I think it is another big blow. I mean, losing races, we lost 10 at the start of the year, if you think about it, whether postponed or cancelled, another 3 up to 13. Okay, we're going to get a few back, but they're not going to be anywhere near in the same capacity, obviously behind closed doors. Talking about doing double races in certain venues, I think Formula One is in danger here of losing those commercial opportunities. I think that the difficult situation that it's faced, we all understand. But of course, by putting on these races behind closed doors events, people will see it taking place. And I think it's kind of a slow return to action, which I totally understand. But of course, the danger is then that people will see that it can be done remotely and just obviously just on TV. And I think, you know, there is a real threat that the deals won't be happening around the circuit anymore. Perhaps Liberty needs to be a bit more proactive and going out and chasing that money rather than assuming that people come into those sort of big hubs, financial hubs like Shanghai, like Singapore, where the deals are done. They're going to have to be a bit more creative, I think. It's changed the landscape, not only for F1, but also the commercial side as well.
And certainly for Formula One purists, they'll say losing a track like Suzuka in Japan will devalue a championship. I mean, Julianne, what have people said to you about that?
Definitely, nobody wants to lose Suzuka, one of the best tracks of the whole season. The same with Singapore. It's not a very famous track. It's not one of the classics, but it's one of the very best races of the season. And also Azerbaijan, which is one of the most expensive races of the season, or one of the races that gets Liberty and the teams more money. So there are 3 races that it's really hard for Formula One to miss. And I agree with Ben, it will devalue the championship, but also how can you not devalue the championship or anything else in a moment like this? You have to put Formula One into the global context. And they're doing their best with what they have. And it's a kind of championship that is really hard to get going in the current situation. Because the whole problem is Formula One can race in Europe without spectators and without the VIPs as well, without paddock club tickets. I think that's a very important thing for us to touch on. But Formula One cannot leave Europe without those tickets, because it cannot leave Europe without a promoter's fee. Otherwise, it would be very expensive for Formula One to go there. So they are in a little bit of an impossible situation here, trying to balance out how much they're going to spend going to these flyaway races and how much they're able to get it back if there are no spectators.
And maybe I can add something here. I think Julianne's absolutely right, because I think we're going to find out at the end of this coming week that the Vietnam race will have to, again, not happen this year. I understand the decision will be made at the end of this week by the government. And it's just, I can imagine, again, why would they risk having a race at this point? I don't know about you guys. I watched the IndyCar race from Texas, and I had tears in my eyes just watching a live motor race again. And that's from Texas, which is one of the worst speedways in the world, isn't it? All the terrible things that happen there. It's like Zhuhai circuit. It's like a dreadful racetrack. Anyway, the point is, if that puts tears in your eyes, imagine what it's going to be like when we go to places like Spielberg twice, or Silverstone, or Barcelona. It'll be fantastic.
Yeah, I think more races will go this season, and F1 are going to have to get creative with where they can and do go. And my understanding is tracks like Kota, even Brazil, are they really going to be in a position to host races come the end of this year? Julianne, you obviously know the situation in Brazil more than us. So what are you hearing about possibilities of races there?
Well, the promoters are saying we're just waiting for Liberty to set up a date for us, and we're gonna sell tickets. But there's a lot of people saying they are crazy about selling tickets because the pandemic is still rising in Brazil. It's the same situation in Mexico as well. They said they are up for going in the predicted dates they had before, but it depends on what the pandemic will do. The same thing that's happening in Texas, in Mexico, and in Brazil. The numbers are still rising, and they are opening up the shops because the economic pressure is just too much. So we don't know for how long the situation would be as bad as it is right now. Brazil, as you know, is the second country with the biggest number of cases right now, and it's rising. It's still rising. So right now, it sounds crazy for them to say we're going to sell tickets and it's going to be a normal race, but that's what they are doing at the moment.
I think that we will see races in Austin. I think we'll have one. I'm not so sure about Brazil. I'm not so sure about Mexico. That's my concern about those two. I think that Liberty will probably do all they can to make sure that we get some sort of race in the States. I think that they need to do that. They need to maintain with a presence over there. I'm just not sure whether it will be for fans or whether it will be behind closed doors. We'll just have to wait and see. But I think they will try and make that happen.
And Julianne, it's probably an apt point just to talk about what's going on in Brazil with TV rights as well, because that's a developing situation, isn't it?
Let me just add something I forgot about Texas. The health authority there said last week, I think, that they don't think there'll be any events with the spectators in the state until the end of the year. So maybe F1 could be looking into somewhere else. I agree with them. They will want to race in the US, and the US is different from European countries. They take decisions. They are a federation of states, right? So different states have different rules, and they might look into racing elsewhere. Regarding the TV rights situation, it's very complicated in Brazil. Nobody knows what's going to happen. Brazil has the last year of the race contract, of the Grand Prix contract, running up until the end of this year. Brazil doesn't pay a race fee, which is a deal made by Bernie Ecclestone when he was leaving F1 in 2016. And Brazil is also, it's the last year of Globo's contract with F1, which means Globo responds for roughly 20% of the world's Formula One Global's audience, because Brazil is the biggest country where Formula One is popular, and Globo shows all races on open air TV. That's why it's so huge. That's the audience is so huge. And right now, actually, since September last year, they are not negotiating with Liberty anymore. They didn't accept the value that Liberty was asking for. And they said, we don't want to have Formula One anymore. And right now, the situation is the same people who are trying to bring the Brazilian race to Rio de Janeiro are also trying to buy the F1 rights to maybe work with a production company independently and try to sell it back to Globo, but only showing a few races, not all races. And that's the best case scenario. Or you could go only to streaming, or you could go to a mix of streaming, some races on open air TV and some races in cable TV. That would mean that Formula One would lose 20% of its global audience. So it's huge news, actually news that are not happening. Right now, if you ask me what's going to happen, I don't know, but it's very unlikely that Formula One will remain an open air TV throughout the whole season in 2021.
The whole TV rights, Formula One needs to make money. That's understandable. But even with, let's say here in the UK, we've got 2 races at Silverstone. Only one will be broadcast on terrestrial free-to-air TV. The other one will still be behind a paywall on Sky. And so many people upset about that decision. As fans, they're not able to go and buy their tickets and see the race, and now they can't watch the race for free. I mean, was this an opportunity for Formula One that they haven't taken or couldn't take?
I guess I need to go first as a TV broadcaster, and it's, as you know, Jenny, it's very unlike me not to be pushing you out of the way in the pen and going and being able to speak or ask a question at least. And apologies for all those times when that happened by accident, of course.
Of course.
And I'm waffling now because I don't know how to answer this question, because I know it's, as you said, it's unbelievably complicated, isn't it? Because the TV rights money is a very big component of what makes the Formula One world go round, literally. And so you can understand why it's not just a matter of Liberty said, okay, no problem, we don't need the money from you guys. Then the teams will have essentially less money to go racing with. So I think I'll stop there, because I don't know how to answer. I'm glad I'm not the one making the decision.
Ben?
Well, like everything, I think that there's potential, isn't there? I mean, no one expected this pandemic. I'm sure that there was no plans in the contract for a global pandemic. I think that had you started these discussions early, perhaps there might have been some leeway. We've seen it with football. If we talk about the Premier League's coming back this weekend, and we're always glad of that. I'm doing a game off the TV. I'll give you a little bit of background. You're allowed one journalist at the ground per organisation. That person will be sat in the stands, effectively writing a match report. They'll send that from the stadium, and then there'll be another person remotely watching on TV for the quote. So it's quite a strange process. But I'm waffling again, and the reason I say that F1 has opportunities is that Sky have made some of the stuff available on Pick, which is a free-to-air digital channel, but it allows people to have access to football. It's obviously on the BBC, which is free-to-air, and there's BT Sport. So there's a number of different platforms, and what the thinking is to give the people, the public, a little bit of a boost. Sports back, everyone's happy, but also to reel them in. And I think that is what F1 could have done. They could have done a free-to-air deal, perhaps with Sky or maybe the BBC or Channel 4, who knows. But just change the landscape a little bit. Hope that more people watch. Everyone's a bit of a captive audience at the moment. You've got millions of people all sat at home because they can't go to any pub apart from the virtual pub, but that's another story. And then they've all got to sit at home. Everyone wants to watch it. If you've got a race on at a convenient time, you will get millions of people watching it. And if they enjoy what they see, then they might subscribe to the Sky package. They might look at doing the Channel 4 highlights package and recording that on a regular basis or watching it live. So I think that there was opportunity, but I just don't think they've seized it. I think there were so many other factors which they focused on, which was sort of getting all the money from the various different promoters, ensuring teams didn't go bust during this period, that they haven't actually thought about the actual potential which they could have had, which would obviously been reaching millions of people, not just in the UK, but of course we could have rolled this out into different countries as well. I'm sure that other broadcasters may have been open to some suggestions in, Germany, Italy, Brazil, perhaps even in Asia as well. So I think that there was a potential for that, and they seem to have missed it a little bit.
Can we tell that Ben hasn't spoken to anyone else apart from his family for far too long? I love it.
I was interested because it's the Fast Talkers podcast or vodcast, so I thought, I better talk a bit quicker.
Someone's put a rocket up you. I love it. That's what happens if you go out for a run at 7:30 this morning. Let's move the dialogue on slightly and talk about two other things. Young guns coming through. The first is George Russell. He's obviously won the Virtual Grand Prix Championship. Who knew that Williams would be winners of Le Mans and George Russell would be the F1 champion at this point in 2020? But in all seriousness, how important do you, Matthew, think this is for someone like George Russell? Does it mean anything to the wider world?
I don't think it's important to him, but I think it's just another indication of the way that George Russell goes about his life in motor racing, isn't it? It's every single thing he does, he maximizes the opportunity from it. And I say that as somebody who rode in the AMG Mercedes round Suzuka with him a couple of years ago, and I've only just stopped talking about it because clearly he wanted to make sure that everything, as I say, everything he does, I've been sort of telling people how mega George Russell is based upon him driving an incredibly fast lap in a road car, and everything he does, he's done it. So it's just another step towards him becoming a world champion.
Julianne?
I had the same experience with him, but that was in Mexico, so a much easier circuit. While he was just trying to scare me, he was just saying, "Oh, so you work for who? Should I know you? Do you go to all the races?" So he was doing two things at the same time. He was driving really quickly, and he was trying to get to know me because it was just before he started his Formula One career. And in the end, right in the end of the staging section in Mexico, he nearly lost the back of the car completely. We nearly crashed, and then he just looked at me like, "Is everything okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, I think that was cool, wasn't it?" And I left the track and I went to an interview with Toto. And I had the Pirelli thing that they give us to the fast laps, and Toto was like, "Which car was you?" "Yeah, I was with George." "Was it you? And nearly crashed in a hill. What a bastard!" Like, yes, that happened. But I agree with Matthew. He's this guy. He's the guy with the notebook taking notes. He's a little bit of an old guy, because he's not like one of these youngsters in terms of, "Oh, I don't care about what the engineers tell me," or something like that. He really studies a lot, a bit of an old-fashioned way, but he showed to be also the young guy connected to esports, training all the time. I'm sure he trained a lot for that. I interviewed Pietro Fittipaldi, who did the whole season, and he said that they would meet on Discord and they would train for like 8-9 hours a day. So they were taking that very seriously. I'm not sure if we took that seriously, but for them it was the opportunity for them to show they're good, and the opportunity especially for George, of having the same kind of equipment as everybody else, and he nailed it.
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, I think he used it as a shop window just to reiterate to the wider world, to all of us who he knew, had an eye on it, and to the likes of Toto Wolff and those other people that have been so influential in his career, to say, look, give me the opportunity, give me the right car, and I will deliver, because that is what I do. And as you say, Julianne, he takes it seriously whilst being able to give off that fun PR young guy vibe. And he, I think, has really used this time. Everyone's used it differently, haven't they? But he's used this time to go, right, this is my shop window, and I'm going to go and prove to people that I've got what it takes to get a seat in Mercedes full time. Ben, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think so too. It's a good reminder, wasn't it, that he's actually there. He was a little bit slow on the uptake of sort of the virtual racing. I think, people like Lando Norris had a bit of a head start. And if we're talking about, let's not, obviously we spoke about talent, but let's talk about profile. And I think that if you was doing a podium of profiles of British drivers, you'd have Lewis as P1. I think you'd have Lando at P2, and then probably George at P3. I think that he realised that he needed to increase his profile, whether it be on social media, whether it be, within F1. And I think that he's done, as we're talking about, everything possible to reaffirm his position that he deserves to be in F1, that he's quick, he's a meticulous planner and works very hard. And I think that's good. And I think that Mercedes are paying attention. If you speak to anyone there, they speak so highly of him. If you talk to anyone at Williams, Claire Williams is desperate to keep hold of him. She keeps reminding Toto that when she signed him, last year, that he was on a 3-year deal with them. So she wants to keep him. Mercedes want to keep him. He's obviously winning virtual races. Great, brilliant. In terms of a series, does it mean anything? Probably not. Not really. Not in the great scheme of things, but it's good for him and his profile.
So I'll ask each of you, starting with Ben, then Matthew, then Julianne, who will be in the Mercedes alongside Lewis Hamilton next year, in your opinion? Ben?
I think it will be Valtteri Bottas, just because you can't get rid of someone when there has been no races. He hasn't really done anything wrong. Last year he came second. I would like to see someone different. I would like to see George. I'd love to see Sebastian Vettel, but I think it's probably going to be Valtteri, just because there's, why change a winning formula?
Yeah, I'm afraid I think Ben's right. And I say that because under the heading of Valtteri being a great guy, isn't he? One of those lovely guys we love to talk to. But I also think he's got closer and closer to Lewis. I think he is very close now to Lewis on a lot of tracks. I think Monaco last year, he was I think he was actually a little bit quicker than Lewis from time to time. And as you say, Ben, so unless he really makes a bit of a fist of the races we have this season, I think Valtteri will be very difficult to replace for 21.
Well, I don't really know. I'd love to see Sebastian Vettel. I think Vettel hasn't had the kind of car in which he's better at in the last few years at Ferrari. And he's not the best driver in not the midfield, but fighting for positions. It's not how we see Vettel driving on its best. And if he could start from the front in a battle with Lewis, that would be a completely different Sebastian Vettel, I think closer to what we've seen at Red Bull. But I do not think that it's going to happen. But I also think that Mercedes have to look at Red Bull and at Ferrari, what they're doing with their drivers. Because let's say if Red Bull stays with, if they keep Alex Albon next year, they're going to have a team with guys with 25, 23 years old. Ferrari will have 26, 23 years old. And they will have Lewis with 36 and Valtteri with 31. So I think they might be looking into getting the lineup younger, as of course, they're not going to give up Lewis Hamilton. They are not crazy. I think they would give the chance to George, use that year that not a lot of things are going to change in terms of the car, and give him the shot for him to be a better driver in 22, and maybe preparing the day when Lewis is leaving and George is already settled in the team. So I think it would be, I agree with you that maybe Valtteri didn't have time, but he has time. He has that time in the last few years to show his championship material. I always thought he was. When I interviewed him for the first time in 2013, I remember leaving an interview thinking, I just interviewed a world champion. But I think he lost a little bit of his light in the last few years. And I think it's time for Mercedes to give the chance for someone younger, especially compared to what the other teams are doing.
The logical place, of course, for Valtteri, the logical place for George is to go to Racing Point, because they need to have 2 Formula One drivers, and they've only got 1 and a bit at the moment.
Gosh.
And that's the first thing. And then, and then the problem that Mercedes have got, if you think about it, is if Lewis wins this year and then wins in 21, what happens next? Because whoever they chose, whether Valtteri or George, they haven't really got a world champion, have they? So I think it's quite a lot going on. But I'm more concerned about George getting into a front running car than the others.
Very quickly, because we've still got Jamie Chadwick to talk about, but Andy Cowell leaving Mercedes, he's the man behind the powertrain. He's probably one of the most successful people in the paddock if you look at individual achievements. I think that's quite a big shock for Mercedes. I don't know if any of you were also sat there yesterday when the press release came out, kind of reeling from it, Ben.
I think it wasn't a shock yesterday. It was a shock when he went to see them in the new year and told them. I think the factor that undermines or illustrates how important he is the fact that he told them in the new year that he wanted to leave. The announcement came out yesterday, and he's going to be retained in some sort of golden handcuff role until 2021. So that shows you just how important he is to Mercedes. If he didn't have any importance, then they would probably say, okay, 6 months gardening leave, then you can go. But the fact he's being kept on for such a long period of time shows you that he knows so many secrets, and they're worried about that passing somewhere else. The question is, where does he go next? That's for me is the big thing that I need to find out. Where is he off to?
Yeah, and I think from an engineering point of view, it's interesting because it might be that what they can achieve with this V6 turbo engines is not that exciting for him anymore, and then he decided to go and look for doing something else. Because when the engineers start to leave, it's because they feel there's not much more they can add. So I think it's interesting to see in this point of view as well.
I don't have much to add other than I'm interested to learn, as we will no doubt in the future, why he is stepping away from the coal face. And I suspect, as you said, Julianne, it's sort of achieved everything he's going to achieve, and he sounds like he's got a pretty good handle on life.
Talking about good handles on life, that takes us perfectly, Matthew, into talking about Jamie Chadwick. So there were pictures of her just before lockdown in New Zealand. I was like, what a weird place to go on holiday when you've got a global pandemic. Thinking there must be more to that story, and surely there is more to that story. She was out there meeting guys at Rodin because she is now their number one person, and she has the backing from that company, which has led to her getting a seat in the European F3 Championship, which is, Arthur Leclerc is going to be in there this year as well. Which is Charles' younger brother. So this is a good championship for her to be in, and a clear pathway now for her potentially to get to Formula One. Julianne, how big a deal is this, do you think, for someone like Jamie Chadwick?
I think it only goes on to prove the W Series was important. Was the whole point of W Series is not to keep women away from racing with men, but just to give them race experience in an F3 car, to give them visibility so they could take the step that Jamie's doing. So I think it just goes on to prove that it was the right way to approach things regarding female racing. And let's see how she does. You're right, it's a good championship. It's the regional F3 championship, and last year it was the first year of the championship, and some drivers were coming from F3 and from F2 to do 1 and 2 races. I think they were going to go there and dominate, and they didn't. So it's a strong field. It was last year. It is this year as well. So it's a good starting point for her.
And is that the series that Julianne, that has the same type of car that they were using, similar car to the one they were using in W Series?
Yes, it's the basic F3 car. Yeah.
That's good. That'll give her, so she's had that year of getting to know the car, confidence and winning. Good, another step forward.
Yeah, I think from my point of view, W Series was a big question mark when it started. How are you going to develop the female talent from that point and not just isolate them? And I think what Jamie's done, and I don't know how much is W Series helping her, how much is her winning the championship, and how much is her actually just going out there and making these connections. But David Dicker, who she made a connection with in New Zealand, his vast wealth. And I think what you need to succeed in, high-level motorsport right now is a backer. Whether it's a Red Bull that comes in to sign you, whether it's Ferrari who have just launched their own, route for females to get into their cars. Whatever it is, you need cash. And this guy has said she's phenomenally talented. She has a championship win behind her, and he's signed her up and he's going to back her. And that is a massive turning point for her in her career.
Yeah, isn't it a shame that she needs the backing, though, to get there? I think that she is a fantastic racing driver. I've got nothing but praise for Jamie. I interviewed her probably about 3 or 4 years ago before all this kicked off. And she was just a fascinating person back then and really driven. And, I've followed her career all the way through. W Series, what a great series that is. I think the disappointing factor was that she won it and then there was still no career path for her. There was no other options, which I think was a bit of a sad point about that championship. Obviously, it's designed to give people profile and try and help people get to F1. It looks as though it's going to work, but of course, as we're saying now, it's all about the backing. I can't help feeling that there's so many good racing drivers, male and female, that are just slipping through the net just because they don't have this financial backing. There's no question about her talent. She's a fantastic racing driver, and it's great that she's got the backing in place, but I just wish it wasn't about the money. That's the sad thing. So I think it highlights a bit of a flaw in the process. And of course, it's up to these teams now to start scouting, I think, lower down and trying to pick these gems up and sort of nurture them through. I think that there's still a reluctance just to wait for them, just to get to a certain level, which requires so much money in the first place before they sign them. I think that teams need to start working at a grassroots level. That's my opinion, sort of following a football model.
Matthew, sorry, anything to add?
No, I think what Ben's saying is highlighting the fact that motorsport is one of the most capital intensive sports in the world. And I have a daughter who's almost 10, and she's a big fan of Lando. She got into Formula 3, relatively easy to consume as a sport. And my wife said, "Are you going to take her karting?" I said, "Don't be ridiculous." She said, "No, but maybe she'll like it." And I said, "She'll do. She's my daughter. She's going to be good at it. Obviously, not lacking any confidence." But I said, "I haven't got 10 million euros to get her to Formula One, which is reality minimum what it would take to get through karting, which these days is hundreds of thousands of dollars per year, even in the relatively simple karting. It's ridiculous, let alone getting into Formula 4, Formula 3, whatever it is, 2 million euros in Formula 2 these days. It's completely ridiculous." And I was very fortunate. I did then take her to a go-kart race in Macau. There was a huge accident in the cadet class, and my wife said, "Oh my God, is he okay?" And I said, "It's not a he, it's a she, first of all, who had the crash. And the fact that there's an ambulance on a kart track tells you, she's not okay." Luckily she was, whoever that girl was. But and even more importantly, it saved me 10 million euros that I didn't have.
Don't worry, she'll find another sport or another hobby which will cost you a fortune, because that's all kids do, is take your money and run with it. We are fast running out of time. Ben, very quickly, I believe you're going to be going to Austria in the first race as things stand. I think are you the only one out of all of us going? I think so.
Probably, yes. I'm still waiting for the list. I got a text message last night saying you're on the list. So I wondered what list that was, but I believe it is the Austria list. I've had to fight to get on it. I think that the process has been a little bit secretive, not understood necessarily all the permutations and everything. I'm trying to do some digging with that. But as it stands at the moment, I've phoned my travel company. We are making plans to get to Austria, to do the 2 races, and then go straight on to Hungary, and then come home and spend it in my bedroom for 2 weeks.
Wowzers, that's dedication. Well, good luck. We'll all be back home thinking of you and eager to hear how it goes. I have to say thank you so much for your time. Thank you to Matthew, Julianne and Ben for coming on to Fast Talkers and joining me. Here's to the season. Just very quickly, I would like a prediction from each of you of who you think is going to win the first race. So that's Austria 1. We'll start with Julianne, please.
I always like being bold, and usually I like being wrong as well. I would say Alex Albon.
Okay, good. I'll write that down. Hang on a minute, Albon. Right. Matthew.
I think as much as I would like that to happen, as he's the local driver for Fox Sports Asia, I think Max Verstappen is a more likely candidate for the top step of the podium.
Ben?
I too am going for Max Verstappen. I think the track suits him. Track suits Red Bull. He's been working hard. I think he's the one that's going to win this one.
Of course, we all know it's going to be Lewis Hamilton, but it's good to have that debate. Right. Love to you all. Stay safe, and thank you again for joining me. Bye for now.